Hello, 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 it's Knits for Sanity, and welcome to part 4 of my series on mitered squares. If you are brand new to my series, I encourage you to go back and start with video 1, or if maybe you've missed a video, go back and start where you left off. For a brief recap of what we have done in the last 3 tutorials, in the very first tutorial, I discuss what a mitered square is and give you 2 different methods to create a mitered square. In my second tutorial, I discuss how you can, by using your last knit stitch, which is a knit 2 together, in your first mitered square, you can create the first stitch for your second mitered square. And then you can complete this square by both picking up and casting on the remaining number of stitches you need. Using this method, you can create a nice long row of squares. In my last tutorial, I discussed how we can pick up all of the stitches we need, as well as casting on the additional stitches we need to create a square that moves in the other direction. For this video, we will discuss how do we pick up and knit this square. So, for my sample here, this is a little bit larger than what I'm doing for my demo. And for my sample, I have left these 2 stitches live with a piece of scrap yarn, holding them there. But if I so desire, I did leave a long enough of a tail that I can actually bind off and finish this square off if I should so choose. Does that mean that I am now stuck and can no longer add more squares? Absolutely not. That is exactly what we did to get this square in the first place. So it is totally up to you. You can bind off and just pick up all of your stitches, or you can leave 2 live stitches and have your first stitch available for your next square. All right, so this is my demo piece. And again, I did the same thing with this one, scrap yarn, 2 live stitches. And today we're going to learn how we add this square right here. It is not doing anything that you have not done already. It's just a matter of a little bit of planning ahead and taking it a little bit slow. The first thing that you want to always do is kind of plot your path, because what we will be doing is we're going to pick up stitches from this green edge as well as this dark pink edge to get all of the stitches we need to create our square right here. As always, we pick up stitches with the front side of the item facing us. And so I kind of like to look ahead and see, okay, probably pick up first stitch here. And then we're going to go here. And then here. And again, I always pick up the full stitch or both legs of the stitch. It creates a cleaner and more secure picked up edge of stitches. And it does kind of help to go through with your needle actually and put it where you'll be picking up those stitches, especially if you are working with a natural fiber yarn, because that will actually help hold the shape a little bit, making it a little bit more easy to see where you're going to pick up those stitches when you go through to actually do that. I will discuss rounding this corner when we get down to this point. But then we'll get down here, and on this side, we will be picking up our stitches here. It looks different coming at it from this angle, but I assure you, we are still picking up just 1 full stitch, both legs of 1 stitch, all the way down. Okay. So, again, with the right side of the fabric facing us, and getting the yarn that we desire to use next, which I'm just going to use this light pink yarn, we are going to begin by picking up our stitches. So our very first stitch, just a little loop around my needle, pull it through, stitch 1. Leave a little bit of a longer tail than what you normally would, just because the first couple stitches you do are likely to pull on this yarn and make it shorter anyway. Then we go in for our second stitch, wrap our new color yarn around and pull that stitch through. And we are just going to continue going down and picking up all of our stitches. Make sure that you're not using the tail to pick up stitches. I have been known to do that. Sometimes you're just not paying attention and you just kind of get a little bit carried away. As you get going, I find that it becomes much easier to see where you are picking up these stitches. If you hear that noise, that's my other half of my needle flopping around. I use circular needles for 95%. Well, maybe a little bit less than that, because I also use double pointed needles quite often too. But basically all knitting I do is done on circular needles, including flat knitting such as this. I just find that it balances the weight better for me. If you're not familiar with me, I do have a little bit of arthritis in my hands and have had it since I was 12 years old. And so having that balanced weight that's provided by the circular needles is very helpful. It also means that I don't risk losing a needle because I will never have a needle free of stitches. So just some extra little tips there for you. All right, we're starting to come up. Okay, if you recall, when you get to this point, you have kind of like it feels like a knot here. It's not. It is just because of the knit two together stitches that I have here, because that's the method I chose. But there is still the stitch there. It's just a little bit tighter. Pull that through. All right. And then we're going to pick up one last stitch here. Right here. All right, now we're going to count these stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's okay. Don't panic. All right, just trust me on this one. This last stitch I picked up was not strictly necessary, but I wanted to do it because it's going to help create a more closed edge. All right, so now we're going to move around to this side. Right here, this first stitch should be pretty easy for you to see. It's right where the dark pink and light pink connect. We're going to pick up this stitch. This side I find is also a little bit easier to see where you're picking up stitches for most people anyway. But we're going to go down and through and pick up all of these stitches. My apologies that this tutorial is 2 weeks later instead of just 1 week. Last week was a little bit chaotic around here. The kids had parent-teacher conferences, which meant they were home more. They had shorter school days, and I spent like a full school day plus at schools talking with teachers. So last week it was just not feasible for me to be able to do this tutorial. Oops. All right, and again, remember we have this knot, which is not really a knot. It's just where the double decrease happened. You do actually still have a stitch there to pick up. Also, if for some reason you're like, I just can't figure out where that stitch is, this is not, don't stress about it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just do your best, okay? It's not really going to be very noticeable in the end. And then there is one more stitch here to pick up. Likely you won't even really tell in the end. All right, so now we're going to count how many stitches we have picked up from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I've actually picked up a total of 16 stitches from both this green edge and this pink edge. All right, sorry, I had to make a little absence. I realized that I needed a stitch marker. So I wanted to get that before I started moving any further with this. Truth be told, I don't generally use stitch markers when I'm doing mitered squares, but I strongly recommend it if you are new to doing this. All right, so I left off, we actually picked up 16 stitches from this square and 16 stitches from this square, which means we now have 32 stitches total. If you recall, we should have either 30 or 31 stitches, depending on the method of mitered square that you are creating. So to get down to that 32 number, you will be doing one of two things, depending on what type of mitered square you're doing. If you remember, I am doing a knit 2 together 2 times decrease. What I will actually do is I will knit 3 stitches together when I come back. If you are doing the knit 3 together in the center, you will knit 2 stitches together when you come back. Whichever stitches you do knit together, make sure that you are joining together your last stitch of your green square with your first stitch of your dark pink square. So the last of your old, the first of your new, and that will help close this hole a little bit. Next week, we will address finishing and what to do if you do have a little bit more of a gap there than what you would like to see. All right, so we are going to commence with knitting back. And remember, picked up stitches can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to knit that first row back. If need be, just take it a little bit slower. Patience is key. All right, one more. Okay, so now for me, I'm going to knit these next 3 stitches together. Because of how I'm doing it, I need to get down to 30 stitches. If you need to get down to 31 stitches, or obviously this is my example of a square, you can do a different size square, you will knit 1 more stitch and then knit these 2 together to decrease by 1 stitch. So I'm going to pick up, knit all 3 of those stitches together, and then just keep going. And then we will pull that first stitch a little bit tighter, turn our work around, and now we're going to look at it. When you are knitting the square in the center here, it's really kind of difficult to see what you're doing initially, because your stitches are still laid out flat. So your blanket or scarf or whatever you're doing is going to look a little bit funny until you've created those joins in the center and created your square. But now we'll do a quick count of our stitches just to verify. I should have 30 stitches on my needle now. 10, 20, 30. And that is again because we did the knit 3 together in the center. I am also going to identify where I will be putting my stitch marker. Again, for me, it will be right after the first 15 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So right here, which as you can see, does work really well between the green square and the dark pink square. That is where I'll be putting my stitch marker. So this first row back, maybe your trickiest one because you don't have a stitch marker in place yet. Instead, you're just going to knit to where you need to be, which is, for me, it'll be knitting 13 stitches. And remember, if you are doing the knit 3 together, it will be a little bit different for you. 10, 13. All right, then I'm going to knit my next 2 together because I'm on my front side row. So this is where I will start doing my decreases for my mitered square. Place my stitch marker, knit the next 2 together, and then continue finishing it off. All right, from this point forward, I am just knitting a same old mitered square like I have now done many times before. However, I do want to pause before I finish this square and address maybe a question that you may have, and that is, I'm going to actually get my sample piece here. It might be easier to show on here. You're saying to me, Knits for Sanity, when I picked up my stitches along these 2 square edges, I didn't get 32 stitches I picked up. I only got 31, or I only got 30. That's okay, okay? As long as you eventually do end up with the number of stitches that you need on your needles, it will work out. Let's say you pick up 31. Let's say you pick up 16 stitches here and 15 here. If you are doing a knit 2 together 2 times decrease, on your comeback row, immediately after you pick up your stitches, just knit those 2 stitches together in the center here, which that is actually how I created this square, is precisely doing that. I picked up 16 here and 15 here, and then I just knit those 2 together in the center. Or let's say that you have done that and you are doing the knit 3 together in the center. You already have your 31 stitches. Don't worry about it. Just knit back, which is actually what I did here. So these were done intentionally as a further example, just to show you. And as you can see, really, ultimately, you're not going to see a difference in what you have, okay? It's going to look pretty similar. And next week, like I said, we'll discuss some finishing details as well. And that will be our final episode, actually, in this tutorial. All right. So I am going to speed this up and finish off this square now. Remember, wrong side rows is just to knit back. Right side rows, we're doing our decreases. So we got 4, knit 2 together, knit 2 together. We have 2 stitches left on our needle. Now, what you can do, and what I actually did here with my sample, is I then used the last 2 stitches from this square, knit those together using my new color yarn to have the first stitch for my next square, and then I picked up the rest of my stitches to create this square. So you could do that, or you can just bind this off, which I'm actually going to do for this one by just knitting these two together. Securing my end. All right. But yes, you could then keep going this way and just continue picking up all of your stitches as you needed. But there you go. You now know how to pick up and knit stitches. Excuse this long yarn here. For an entire piece of fabric. Whether you are doing a blanket, a scarf, pot holders, washcloths, whatever it is that you may want to just have a bunch of mitered squares for. Next week, or in our next tutorial, we will be discussing some finishing touches as well as addressing some other questions that you may have. So finishing touches, things like, hey, I do have kind of an unsightly hole maybe that's showing up in between my squares. How do we address that? Discussing other things like maybe you don't like that you will have a square that has a different angled decrease center. How do we address that? So that will be our next and final tutorial in our mitered square knit along, if you kind of will. But yes, today, congratulations. You now know everything you need to be able to just keep increasing mitered squares. You can now build off from this piece in any direction that you choose. So congratulations. I hope that you will join me for our 5th and final tutorial. And as I always say, please be kind to everyone around you. You never know what anyone is going through. And I hope that you have a marvelous day. I hope you feel good today. And I will see you again real soon. Until next time.